This is Logical Fallacies Part 3, the last few examples in our 5-example sequence. Here's another example, and in the blue you could read, what do I think of those tree-sitting environmentalists? What do I think of what those tree-sitting environmentalists have to say? I say they're wrong. How could our economy possibly survive if we impose a nationwide ban on all logging? So, first step, again, identify the conclusion. And we can say, oh, it sounds as if this person does not want a ban on logging. Next, we're going to inspect the way the writer tries to support that conclusion. And then we're going to ask ourselves, is that logically tied to the conclusion? Do we consider it to be a sound and valid argument to convince us that there should be no ban on logging? So another part of this conclusion is these tree-sitting environmentalists. They're wrong, and they should not have control over national policy. We might think this is an ad hominem. The author is doing some name calling, and the name doesn't seem to be positive, but it's not horrible. No one specifically is singled out, and many activists do sit in the trees or chain themselves to the trees and sit down beside. So that in and of itself, while not particularly persuasive, is not exactly a fallacy. What she does imply, though, is that the position that these environmentalists have taken is so extreme that we just cannot buy into the extremity. Well, the more extreme the conclusion, the more difficult it is to prove. So it's actually much easier to argue against an opponent who has an extreme position. The burden of proof is so high that almost any defense at all will work to defeat them. The opponent with a moderate position is more difficult to defeat, since it's much easier for them to provide good support for a modest conclusion. So we can see here that the arguers may have good reason to cast their opponent's position as extreme, making them easier to attack. And we can also see, though, the issue at hand, the logging ban, is not really addressed. It's sidestepped. So this particular tactic is known as straw man. It's taking the most extreme position that one's opponent has and acting as if the entire argument rests on that extremity. So, as the screen before you implies, the opposition might say, wait a minute, we're not demanding a ban on all logging, only on logging in old-growth forests or within 200 feet of streams. Some people might be advocating a total ban on all logging, but most environmentalists are not making that claim. Nevertheless, the damage has been done because the writer has rendered the environmentalist argument as such an extreme, polarized position. Here's one more. The argument reads, the life on other planets must be highly intelligent. After all, we've never documented a single case of the aliens landing on Earth, which proves that they realize how dangerous it would be to make contact. Whoa. Okay, so the conclusion, first step, what does the writer want us to believe as a result of this argument? It sounds as if the writer's wanting us to believe there is life on other planets, and that life is more intelligent than we could comprehend. Next, though, we need to inspect the way the argument tries to support the conclusion. We're to assume that the fact that the aliens have never landed on Earth, or there's no documented case of aliens landing on Earth, is evidence of the intelligence of the aliens. It's an argument based on what we don't know rather than what we do. So, just as we said before, the arguments concluding life on other planets is intelligent and they're smart enough to stay out of sight. And because they've never been spotted, we know they've stayed out of sight. So something is going wrong in this argument. Saying the life on other planets is intelligent assumes that it does exist in the first place. The proof offered in the argument also assumes aliens exist. If they don't exist, then the fact that they've never been spotted isn't evidence at all. So this is an example of begging the question. It assumes the truth of the thing it is trying to prove. In this instance, life on other planets is the premise that is just assumed to be true rather than proven. In conclusion, obviously we have not looked at every type of rhetorical device or logical fallacy from the chapter, but we have examined a basic strategy for thinking about identifying logical fallacies. When we're confronted with an argument, we should first find the conclusion. What is it the writer wants us to believe? Then we look at the evidence. How is that evidence applied to the conclusion? Is it relevant? Are there unwarranted assumptions? Even without studying logic, we can determine often what's wrong, but since we have studied it, we can now connect the problem with the name.